For centuries, Assyrian communities endured hardship without disappearing. Then the First World War began, while the Ottoman Empire was breaking apart. At first, many expected another hard period. They were wrong. News reached isolated settlements slowly, yet the danger grew beyond hardship into a threat to the community itself. Long survival offered no protection. Much of the world gave no answer. That silence reached families in mountain villages and crowded regional towns. Their ancestors had ruled an ancient empire. Nineveh and Ashur stood at its center. Assyrians lived across southeastern Anatolia, northern Mesopotamia, and northwestern Persia. Some villages lay high in Hakkari's mountains, apart from nearby settlements. Others lived in Urmia, Mosul, Diyarbakir, Mardin, and Tur Abdin. Their homes marked daily divisions. Mountain roads separated one community from another. Cities connected families to trade, churches, and neighboring districts. Christian faith held these scattered communities together. Many traced their Christian roots to the first centuries. They belonged to the Church of the East, the Chaldean Catholic Church, and the Syriac Orthodox Church. Beyond the churches, local authority rested with tribal leaders and patriarchs. Ottoman rule barely reached many mountain districts. Religion shaped public life across the empire. Muslims held political and military power. Christians could keep their faith, but paid extra taxes and faced discrimination under legal restrictions. In remote valleys, Assyrian communities made many decisions themselves. Their leaders settled local affairs and guarded religious traditions. Distance limited the reach of Ottoman officials. That freedom had a price. Christian communities kept their faith, yet lived for centuries with extra taxes and unequal law. Unequal law now met a weakened empire. By the end of the 19th century, Ottoman rule had lost territory in Europe and the Balkans. Nationalist uprisings spread. Greece had broken away, while Serbia and Bulgaria had gained independence. Russia threatened Ottoman lands from the north. Officials watched that danger and turned toward Christian communities in eastern Anatolia. Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians fell under suspicion. Many officials feared these communities might help Russian forces during an invasion. Losses abroad narrowed the ruler's view at home. Fear of Russian help made eastern Anatolia's Christian population an object of suspicion. In the eastern provinces, suspicion soon left traces on the ground. During the Hamidian massacres of 1894 to 1896, Sultan Abdul Hamid II ruled an empire where hundreds of thousands of Armenians were killed. Assyrian communities were attacked in Diyarbakir and Tur Abdin. Villages were looted, churches were destroyed. Many Assyrians died alongside Armenian neighbors. The warning was visible. Christian communities had once survived under older protections inside the empire. Those protections were disappearing, village by village, after each raid and each ruined church. Kurdish tribes also disputed land, taxes, livestock, and political influence with Assyrians across eastern provinces. Some Kurdish groups sheltered Christian communities. Others raided them regularly. Against that uncertainty, minorities looked to the Young Turks in 1908. The movement seized power in the Ottoman Empire. It promised constitutional reform, equality, and modernization. Hope returned briefly. The Committee of Union and Progress soon ruled from the center. Mehmed Talat Pasha, Ismail Enver Pasha, and Ahmed Cemal Pasha led the new course. Then the empire lost more territory. After the Balkan Wars, millions of Muslim refugees entered Anatolia. Many arrived grieving, angry, and desperate for land and security. Officials tied Christian minorities to foreign enemies, tearing the empire apart. Suspicion moved from the frontier into policy. Constitutional reform and equality faded as the Committee of Union and Progress promoted Turkish-Muslim unity. Muslim refugees were already reaching Anatolia when Russian troops appeared along the Caucasus border. The frontier pulled every fear closer. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo. Within weeks, Europe entered war. Armies mobilized, alliances hardened. Late that year, the Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers beside Germany and Austria-Hungary. Russian forces advanced through the Caucasus, and eastern Anatolia became a frontline region. Assyrian communities stood between two empires and opposing armies. Ottoman leaders feared that Christians near the frontier would support Russia. Suspicion now followed the troops. By the end of 1914, eastern Anatolia lay at war's edge. War had reached eastern Anatolia. Food grew scarce, refugees filled towns, disease spread, and soldiers took over whole districts. Then came Sarikamish. In January 1915, forces commanded by Ismail Enver Pasha met Russian troops near the border. The Ottoman army lost. Tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers froze to death in the winter cold. The defeat left officials searching for blame. They pointed at Armenians and other Christians. They claimed those communities had helped Russia. No proof changed the outcome. Refugees, hunger, illness, and military rule already pressed on the region. After Sarikamish, accusations from Ottoman officials carried the force of government action. A military failure became a charge against Christian civilians. Those accusations did not remain words. They became a justification for mass violence against Armenians and other Christians. With rifles laid aside, Christian soldiers lost the protection of their Ottoman uniforms. Officers disarmed them first. Then, they sent them into labor battalions, where many were later executed. In April 1915, authorities arrested Armenian intellectuals across Constantinople. The arrests widened violence against Christian communities. Assyrians faced different attacks from region to region. The outcome often matched. Ottoman authorities, local militias, Kurdish tribal fighters, and irregular units joined assaults on Assyrian communities. In many places, villages vanished within days. Disarmed soldiers entered labor battalions. Many were executed. While soldiers disappeared into labor battalions, families in Hakkari gathered what they could carry. Hakkari lay beside the Persian border. Patriarch Shimon XIX Benjamin led the Assyrian communities. For years, they had held neutrality between Russia and the Ottoman Empire. That protection broke. Ottoman authorities called Hakkari Assyrians a security threat, while Kurdish tribal leaders pressed for military action. During spring and summer of 1915, Ottoman and Kurdish forces attacked mountain villages. Smoke rose above settlements. Attackers burned entire villages, and civilians left with bundles carried in their hands. Roads and riverbanks held bodies left unburied. Assyrian fighters held mountain positions with old rifles and limited ammunition. Men, women, and sometimes children joined the defense. Villages became makeshift fortresses. But each fallen settlement sent more refugees south toward Persia through the mountain passes. Thousands died on the journey from exhaustion, hunger, cold, and disease. While people fled toward Persia, Tur Abdin farther west was already under attack. The region held many Syriac Orthodox Assyrian communities. Its monasteries and villages had stood for centuries. Ottoman officials received delegations from local communities. Some people tried to negotiate. Others handed over their weapons, hoping to prevent bloodshed. Those choices brought no protection. Attackers surrounded settlements around Midyat, Mardin, and Diyarbakir. Churches were looted. Clergy members were killed. Christian families disappeared from places where generations had lived. Empty churches remained after the raids. Mehmed Rashid governed Diyarbakir province. During 1915, killings spread across the province under his administration. Witnesses described armed groups moving from village to village. They separated men first and executed them outside the settlements. Then women and children faced expulsion, abduction, or death. News from the abandoned settlements moved slowly, yet American missionaries in Persia met refugees who carried its proof. The war kept European newspapers fixed on battles, while reports from eastern Anatolia crossed dangerous, limited channels. Diplomats and missionaries still wrote down what reached them. Their notes survive. Missionaries saw exhausted Assyrians arriving from the east, weak from hunger and marked by wounds, frostbite, or disease. Children came without parents or relatives. Some had lost entire families during attacks. The records did not reach readers quickly. They described roads with corpses beside them and villages left empty after their inhabitants fled or died. Persia first appeared to many refugees as a place of safety. That hope drew them onward. Their written accounts preserved deserted villages, bodies on the roads, and children arriving alone. Those records explained why so many people kept moving toward Urmia. By late 1915, hundreds of thousands of displaced people crowded around the city in northwestern Persia. Assyrian and Armenian Christian communities lived there. Russian troops had entered the region, and refugees expected their presence to keep Ottoman forces away. That expectation broke with every withdrawal. Russian units came and went. Ottoman armies crossed the border. Kurdish tribal fighters raided exposed settlements, while control of towns changed again and again. Civilians stood between armed forces with no stable place to go. Crowded camps and villages ran out of food almost at once. People were packed beyond capacity. Typhus and cholera spread through the displaced population and killed many people without direct violence. Urmia had drawn refugees seeking protection. By early 1916, the military situation across the region collapsed again. In 1917, Russia's revolution broke the army holding parts of Persia. Soldiers deserted the front. Russian units withdrew or fell apart. Assyrian and Armenian communities lost one of their few defenders. Ottoman forces and allied militias returned to the region. Refugees remembered earlier massacres. Fear spread through camps and villages. Local victories could not change that exposure. Assyrian fighters defeated Ottoman units in several engagements, but each success stayed temporary. Civilians still faced advancing forces and armed militias. Aga Petros organized Assyrian volunteers to defend the refugees. While volunteers held their ground, Patriarch Shimun XIX Benjamin accepted a promised meeting with Simko Shikak in March 1918. He went to negotiate. The meeting became a trap. An ambush killed the patriarch and many companions traveling beside him. Shimun XIX Benjamin was a religious leader. He also held scattered Assyrian communities together during the war. His death changed the meaning of every promise offered to refugees. Negotiation had ended in gunfire. Trust collapsed with it. Ottoman forces advanced on Urmia later that year. Tens of thousands of Assyrians and Armenians then moved south toward Hamadan beside retreating Allied units. The road led south. Families walked for weeks through heat, hunger, and repeated attacks, carrying children and whatever supplies remained. Bodies stayed along the roads. Children died of dehydration in their parents' arms. Elderly refugees collapsed during the march, while columns kept moving because they could not stop. Bandits and militias attacked again and again, taking supplies and abducting women. Sick people lay beside the route. The patriarch's death removed a symbol of unity. The advance turned fear into flight. Some estimates say thousands of refugees died during this single exodus to Hamadan. Those who reached Hamadan left more than homes behind. Their flight left churches and monasteries without the communities that had guarded them. Before 1915, Assyrian villages stood across Hakkari and Tur Abdin. Churches, monasteries, and schools connected them. Many families spoke dialects of Aramaic. Some monasteries had stood for more than 1,000 years. Mor Hananio Monastery and Deirul Zafaran had survived earlier invasions, dynasties, and empires. Then war emptied the villages around them. Raids looted religious sites. Others were left abandoned. Priests and bishops were executed in many towns because they led their communities. After residents were killed or driven away, no congregation remained to protect church collections. Sacred objects vanished during raids and killings. Manuscripts disappeared from church shelves. Libraries were destroyed. The loss followed the refugees south. Empty monastery rooms remained. Church manuscripts disappeared, and libraries lay in ruins. After the manuscripts vanished, the people who had guarded them were missing too. Across southeastern Anatolia, Assyrian communities that had lived there for centuries disappeared after the war. Whole settlements vanished. Survivors crossed borders, while others converted under pressure to remain alive. Many died in massacres or on refugee marches. Families split apart. Children were taken into Muslim households and raised away from surviving relatives, severed from the people who knew their names and histories. Estimates place Assyrian deaths during the genocide between 250,000 and 300,000. Survivors called it Seyfo, the sword. The word preserved their memory of violence carried out face to face in villages and on roads. After whole communities vanished, survivors remembered who entered their villages and who offered shelter. Soldiers, militias, and armed groups attacked civilians directly. Neighbors sometimes turned on neighbors. Some Muslim families hid Assyrians and risked their own lives. Others joined killings or seized property. Families carried both kinds of stories for generations. War scattered attention beyond the villages. Fear, revenge, propaganda, and survival shaped local choices. Diplomats, missionaries, and aid workers recorded crimes against Assyrians and Armenians. Their reports survived. International protection did not follow. During the war, diplomats, missionaries, and aid workers documented the crimes against Assyrians. The reports remained, but the map changed around the people who had survived. In 1918, World War I ended and the Ottoman Empire collapsed after its armies were defeated. Allied forces occupied parts of Anatolia and Mesopotamia. For Assyrian survivors, that defeat did not restore homes or villages. Their losses remained. Britain and France then divided former Ottoman territories through mandates and colonial agreements. New borders crossed lands where ethnic and religious communities already lived. Those lines did not follow the shape of Assyrian communities. Survivors now lived under new borders. The former empire disappeared from the map, yet Assyrians did not enter a single new homeland. They found themselves spread across several new states. That line could separate a refugee from home, then leave the family under another government. Large Assyrian refugee communities settled in British-controlled Iraq. Others stayed in Syria, Iran, or Soviet territory. Some went farther, to the United States, Europe, and Australia. Many still expected protection or a measure of former autonomy. Allied wartime promises had encouraged that hope, and Assyrian leaders linked it to their cooperation against the Ottomans. The war ended. Major powers turned to their own political interests during the negotiations. Assyrian demands were largely ignored. With no settlement to protect them, Assyrian families faced another shift in Anatolia. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk led a Turkish nationalist movement against Allied occupation and plans to partition the former Ottoman Empire. The war ran from 1919 to 1923. Violence against remaining Christian communities continued in several regions. Families left with what they could carry. Homes stood empty. When the Republic of Turkey was established in 1923, surviving Assyrians had fled ancestral districts or had been forced from them permanently. Across the border, displaced Assyrian families found no lasting safety. British authorities recruited some men into the Assyrian levies. These units defended British interests in Iraq during the 1920s and early 1930s. That service brought suspicion. Some Arab and Kurdish communities accused Assyrians of siding with British colonial rule. Iraq gained independence in 1932. Their position became more dangerous. In August 1933, Iraqi forces and irregular fighters moved towards Somalia in northern Iraq. Armed men advanced along the roads. They attacked Assyrian civilians around the town. Hundreds died. The death toll may have reached thousands. For the survivors, the warning was clear. War had ended years earlier, but the killings had not. Around Somalia, hundreds, possibly thousands of Assyrian civilians were killed. After Somalia, Raphael Lemkin linked the Assyrian experience to a future name for genocide. He studied the mass killings of Armenians and Assyrians while developing that concept during the 20th century. The link mattered. No state spoke for the Assyrians after the war. Survivors had scattered across many countries, and their communities had been weakened by loss and displacement. Their accounts crossed borders in separate bundles of papers under different national names and languages. Armenian survivors built strong diaspora communities and gradually gained broader international recognition, despite denial and political dispute. Assyrians had fewer people and no country to represent them abroad. Their history often disappeared inside wider accounts of the Ottoman Empire's collapse. The killings shaped Lemkin's thinking, yet Assyrian voices reached the world in fragments. Historical records about the Assyrians survived only in pieces. Missionary reports remained, so did church ledgers, diplomatic files, and survivor testimony. Many Assyrian communities were gone. The people who might have kept fuller local accounts had been killed or scattered. Turkish authorities described those deaths through wartime chaos, famine, disease, and civil conflict affecting many groups. Historians studying Ottoman archives reach a different conclusion. They compare official records, eyewitness accounts, and demographic change across Assyrian districts. Their research identifies targeted violence against Christian minorities, including Assyrians. Political tension in the Middle East still shapes the dispute. Modern Turkey rejects the claim that Ottoman authorities carried out deliberate genocide against Armenians or Assyrians. Yet more scholars now use the terms Assyrian Genocide and Seyfo openly. Several European parliaments issued recognitions during the first 2 decades of the 21st century. The evidence often begins with a church book, then an archive page, then one surviving voice. Activists and historians continue preserving survivor accounts of Seyfo.